Welcome to this explainer on the AquaVis framework. We're about to dive into a really unique way of looking at the world and at the markets. And here's the interesting part. It doesn't start with complicated financial models. It starts with the patterns of nature that are all around us. So the whole philosophy really kicks off with this one big idea. The same kinds of patterns you see in nature, like the way a river branches out or the rhythm of the tides, those same patterns are the key to understanding our own complex human systems, like economics and historical trends. So how do they actually do this? Well, think of it like a funnel. We're going to start at the widest part and get more and more specific as we go. We'll kick things off with nature's timeless principles, then see how those are used to map the big picture, filter all that through what they call the 3 pillars of power, apply a pretty unique analytical toolkit, and finally land on something they call the confluence. All right, so let's start at the very beginning, the foundation of this whole thing. And what's really important to get here is that this isn't about market jargon. It's all about core principles taken directly from the design of the natural world itself. First up, you've got fractals. And this is such a cool idea. It's the observation that the same basic patterns repeat themselves at every single scale. I mean, think about it. The jagged shape of a coastline seen from space, it looks a lot like a single snowflake seen up close, right? Well, this framework suggests that those same kinds of self-similar patterns are at play in market behavior and historical events. Okay, so building on that fractal idea, we get to waves. You know how ocean tides have a predictable rhythm? Well, this framework applies that same exact thinking to things like the flow of money, to social mood, and even to politics. It sees them not as just a bunch of random noise, but as these powerful, rhythmic waves that move through time. And that brings us to the third piece of the puzzle, cycles. This one's pretty intuitive. Just like we have the 4 seasons, pretty much everything seems to follow a recurring pattern. There's birth, then growth, then decay, and finally renewal. So understanding where we are in these bigger cycles is absolutely crucial if you want to have any chance of anticipating what might come next. So let's just pause here for a second, because this is really the key. These 3 things, fractals, waves, and cycles, they aren't just poetic metaphors. They are the actual lens, the fundamental operating system that this entire framework uses to view our incredibly complex world. Okay, so we've got our foundation built on nature. Now, how does that actually connect to the real world? This is where we start building a big picture view, standing on the shoulders of giants, so to speak. Now, here's where things get really smart. Instead of trying to reinvent the wheel or be an expert in, everything, the whole approach is about curating and then synthesizing the work of some of the leading thinkers out there. They call it bundling the unbundled, basically taking the best insights from different fields to build a much more complete map of reality. And this is where you can really see that curation in action. It's fascinating, right? You're taking Ray Dalio's work on debt cycles, which tells you a ton about finance, and you're layering it on top of what Strauss-Howe says about generational cycles and demographics. Each one of these is a powerful wave on its own, but when you start to overlay them, you begin to see a much, much clearer and more holistic picture of what's really going on. So, once you have that massive, layered map of the world, what do you do with it? Well, you start to filter out the noise. Instead of getting bogged down in the day-to-day headlines, the focus shifts to the themes that have been the most powerful and persistent drivers throughout all of human history. And that filtering process leads to 3 fundamental pillars of power. These act as the first major filter for all analysis. First, you have technology, because that's what shapes what is even possible in a society. Second is energy, which is what literally fuels civilization. And third, you have money, which is what directs all those resources and power. And I think this is just a brilliant way to cut through the complexity, isn't it? These pillars aren't some newfangled themes. They're the engines of change that have been consistent across empires and across different eras. By focusing on them, you narrow down this incredibly complex world into 3 core areas of focus. It tells you exactly where to fish. So we're getting deeper into the funnel now. We know where to look. Now we need the right tools to actually analyze what we're seeing. And no surprise, this toolkit is also rooted in natural principles. And this is another one of my favorite parts, this cross-disciplinary approach. On one hand, you're using principles from physics to understand the big picture, the whole system, its dynamics, the flow of things. But then you switch gears and put on your biologist hat to analyze the individual organisms, the companies, within that system. You're trying to see which ones are the most resilient and adaptable, which ones are built to survive and thrive. And this is then layered with mathematical tools that are, believe it or not, also found all over nature. We're talking about things like Fibonacci numbers, that simple sequence you see in seashells and flower petals and even galaxies, and things like Elliott waves, which help map the predictable patterns of crowd psychology. The idea is that this is nature's language, and using these tools helps you listen to what the market is telling you, instead of just imposing your own ideas onto it.
All right, here we go. We've reached the very bottom of the funnel. We've gone from the broadest principles of nature all the way down to these specific analytical tools. So, what's the grand finale? What's the final output of this whole process?
So yeah, where does all this lead? What's the point of this incredibly deep, multi-layered analysis? Because it's definitely not just about finding the next hot stock tip. It's about getting to something way more profound. It all leads to what they call the confluence. You can picture it like a Venn diagram, right? You've got your three pillars: technology, energy, and money. And the real magic, the most powerful ideas, they're found right in the middle, at that powerful intersection where all three overlap. And this, right here, is probably the most important thing to remember. The whole point of this entire journey down the funnel isn't just to get actionable ideas. It's about developing a profound understanding of the deep-seated reasons why an idea is powerful in the first place. The what is the output, but the why? Well, that's everything. So in the end, this framework isn't really about giving you a set of answers. It's about giving you a new set of eyes. It's a lens to look at the world differently. And that leaves us with a really powerful question. Not for me, but for you. If you look around the world right now, what patterns, what waves, what cycles can you see starting to play out?